Very good morning to you all. Today I shall be covering from PG second semester and I shall be dealing with the paper CC7, which is Indian and British Criticism, and today I shall be covering Unit 2, Aristotle's Poetics. Some of you have asked for points and keynotes from the lecture, and those will be available in the description box below. So, Poetics is perhaps the earliest surviving work of dramatic theory, and it is perhaps the first extant philosophical treatise to focus on literary theory. This book was written in 335 BC by famous Greek philosopher Aristotle. Now, Aristotle was a disciple of Plato. Plato wrote a book called Republic, in which he has talked about the ideal world. In that particular book, Plato plays poets to very insignificant people. He has banished poets from his ideal world because he thinks that poetry or art has no sense. But Aristotle was to some extent was not happy with this kind of derivation. He understood the importance of poetry in our life and the importance of imitation, which he used to call mimesis. So, according to mimesis, he has classified all the works according to the object of imitations. Aristotle thought that poetry is something which is as it is, or it as he thinks it is, or as it ought to be. Okay, so according to him, the higher quality of imitation is being pointed in tragedy or in epic poetry, and in comedy we can find lower quality of imitations. So there is a famous definition of tragedy in Aristotle's Poetics, which is tragedy is an imitation of an action that is serious, complete, and of a certain magnitude. It is in language embellished with each kind of artistic ornaments, and the several kinds being found in separate part of the play in the form of action, not of narrative, and through pity and fear affecting the proper purgation of those emotions. This particular aspect, the definition of tragedy, was being quoted in his tragedy. Now, what are the essential features of a tragedy? According to Aristotle, it has that mimetic nature. That means it imitates. It is very much serious. It is a full story of appropriate length. The line should be appropriate. There should be some kind of rhythm and harmony. And it is been performed rather than narrated. It is a work of visual arts or performing arts, not something which we read or narrate. Tragedy is of universal significance, and it essentially evokes catharsis, the emotion of pity and fear, into its audience. Now I shall be talking and discussing all these aspects in the latter stage of my lecture. So, according to Aristotle, there are certain parts of tragedy. First and foremost, it is the plot. Then there is character, there is thought, there is diction, there is melody, and there is spectacle. All these six aspects makes a good tragedy. Now, how the plot is been created? One famous critic named Gustav Freytag has pointed out the structure of Aristotelian plot. What is it? It's like a form of pyramid. It's like a pyramid. There is introduction, there is rising action, there is climax, there is falling action, and there is catastrophe. We call it Freytag's pyramid. And if we study all the famous Greek tragedies, we can find this essential pattern of Freytag's pyramid is available everywhere. In every plot, there is unity of action, there is completeness, and it is essential to find the universality of the plot. Apart from this, there are certain essential features in plot. There should be some kind of hubris. What is hubris? Hubris is the excessive pride which leads to the downfall of the protagonist. There is hamartia, that is the miss the mark or error of judgment. That is the particular point when the protagonist makes the mistake. Then there is peripety or peripetia, which means the reversal of the fortune. After which incident the fortune of the protagonist turns. At the end, there is anagnosis, that is the revelation of the truth, and then there is the catastrophe. Catastrophe is the final nail in the coffin, that is the denouement of the drama, the tragic and devastations and sufferings of the protagonist towards the end of the plot. That constitutes the tragedy. Now, if we talk about the second part, there is tragic hero. That is the character part. What does a tragic hero do? He is generally a renowned person who prospers, who is very courageous, and who is loved by all. And most importantly, the nature of the protagonist or the tragic hero, it is always consistent in nature. It does not change. It does not change according to the acts. For example, Sophocles' Oedipus Rex, Oedipus the king. If you study the character of Oedipus Rex, you will find out throughout the play, he has maintained his consistency, and which is very essential for a tragedy. And the peripety or peripetia, that is the reversal of fortune, it happens generally due to some tragic flaw in character. The protagonist can be very much proud, he can be ambitious, and those tragic flaws actually lead the character towards his downfall. The third aspect of tragedy is the thought, which generally results in catharsis. Now, what is a catharsis? Catharsis is the purification and purgation of emotions, particularly pity and fear. It is something which evokes this kind of emotions among the audience, among the viewers who are actually watching the tragedy. For example, pity. How pity can be evoked from a tragedy? When the audience sees the tragic situation of the hero, he or she feels pity for the protagonist, and there can be the emotion of fear by the audience who identifies him or her with the tragic situation of the protagonist. And the nature of the tragedy always evokes either this pity or this fear in the tragedy's audiences. Now, The fourth part of tragedy is diction. What is a diction? It's a metrical arrangement of words and the poetic language, the tone, etc. and etc. And diction is very much essential for the construction of tragedy, and Aristotle has given immense importance to diction. Then there is melody. Melody is the fifth aspect of tragedy, which is connected to the songs and chorus, which maintains the melody of the play. And according to Aristotle, it keeps the unity of the plot and it keeps as an integral aspect of the plot. Last but not the least, he talks about spectacles. Spectacles is an automatic byproduct of the play, and spectacles is something which has been experienced by the audience of a tragedy. So this is the gist of the idea of tragedy by Aristotle, and he considered this as the greatest form of poetry. Thank you.